Rachel Barenbaum, author of A Bend in the Stars, and today my guest, Una Mannion, is the author of the debut novel, A Crooked Tree. I loved it. I thought it was so good, and everyone should go out and read it. I'm really excited to have you here today, Una. Tell me, what is your book about?
Thank you so much for having me, Rachel. So my book takes place in the summer of 1981, and I suppose, focuses on a family of young children. And the catalyst event in the book is driving home the very last day of school. The children are squabbling, and the mother puts one of the children out on the road. And she's a 12-year-old. She's the narrator's younger sister. And I suppose that event, the children look back at her standing there. They sense something will happen. Dusk is falling, and something does happen, and that becomes the sort of the catalyst plot event. But I think the book is more an examination of sibling relationships, female friendships, teenage female friendships, grief, and I suppose maybe America in the early 1980s.
So what grabbed me from the beginning was this moment of parenting where, the woman, she's recently widowed, the mother, and she has these five children. And so they're grieving and she's just at the end of her rope, right? Just get out of the car. And as a parent, I have been there. I have felt that experience. I was wondering, where did you get this idea from? How did you feel that so accurately?
I think because it did happen in our own family. I've never done it to my kids, but definitely there are times I have wanted to do it. And that image was always the starting point for me. I always knew that I didn't know what would totally unfold in the novel. So I'm not one of those people who plots a novel before I start. But I knew I was interested in that rash act that ends up having consequences. And even though, I've read some of the threads, like on Goodreads, people are saying this mother is terrible, this is outrageous, I couldn't read this book. And there's a part of me that thinks, like, she's a single mother with five kids. She is at the end of her tether, and it's a very human thing to do. And she's emotionally very distant from the kids, and they she's flawed, but the children try to protect her, so they don't tell her what happens, partly because they don't want to get in big trouble. They're trying to protect their mother who's struggling.
I'm so sorry to hear that there's been some backlash or some comments against that, because I feel like we need to talk about these tough parts in parenting, right? If we need to find better ways forward or to make different decisions, we can't just hide them. And that seems sort of the point of the book, too.
Yeah, I think I think about this a lot because, I've reared three kids. My youngest is 15 and my eldest is 20. And I have three, one in the middle there, and who just turned 18. And I think as as I've been parenting, I've parented in a very different way than I grew up. I had freedom when I grew up. I had freedom to get in trouble and get into bad experiences, and to wander into amazing experiences. And I think a little bit now, I feel that I give kids that opportunity. We live out in the middle of the country. They're very dependent on me to to be driven wherever they need to go. And I wonder how much fear and, that my perception of the universe, of not trusting the universe, that I've taken away some freedoms that they have. And I do think that I'm not the only parent starting to question that, about how much we have to protect our kids.
Also, at the core of this novel, though, is really the 15-year-old narrator, right? And this sort of struggle to pull away from your family at a time when maybe your family is trying to keep you close. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's funny. I almost feel like Libby's the opposite of that. So experience, there are these other forces, these external forces that, her family unit is to a certain extent coming to an end, and she's the one who's not ready to let it go. And so I feel like so much of this last summer, where she's with her family, is her desperation to to hold on to everything, and to not grow up, and not have people want, go into their next phase of life. And she's only 15, and it is too young. But I think there's a lot, she learns over the course of the summer.
So there's so many emotions and different paths in this book. I'm curious, what was the hardest part to write?
Ooh. It's funny. The ending came. I found the last few chapters wrote very quickly. There's sort of, I suppose, there's a kind of climatic, night of action, which, is really. I have no idea. I suddenly was writing an action scene, and I'm not even now. I'm kind of like, ooh, it's so outside my what I thought I would write. But after that, and the last few chapters, maybe I was so in the book at that point, I found them much easier. And I think the hardest parts to write, I found the mother hard to write. And a lot of people have commented, like, the mother, we can't see her and we want to know more about her. But I think that was the part of the point, was how to strike that balance of the child can't see her. She can't see her mother's pain. She can't see her mother's desire. She can't see how young her mother's, still in her 30s. She's young. And so I think that probably that writing the mother took the most care, because I definitely did not want to write like an Electra story where you have the ghost of the father and wanting to murder the mother. I didn't want the tyrannical mother. But there is a damage there, and I just thought, how do you find that place where at the end it's not all tidied up, but there is understanding, and there is recognition of who her mother is.
So you are an award-winning poet. You've written short stories, but this is your debut novel. Can you tell me how different it is to write a novel?
Yeah, so it's funny. I have been writing quite a bit of short stories, and the poetry often comes out of prose for me. So I'm not someone who always starts off writing a poem. I'll probably be writing a story, and the register starts to change, or the language starts to heighten, and I'm like, oh, line break, or that something's compressing. And I love the compression of the short story. I loved the craft. I think it's an incredible incision into, like, straight into the heart of something. But I think every word counts, and you have to be very skilled. I loved the freedom of writing a novel. I loved the freedom of taking time, of looking around, of having a broader span of time, of having extra characters. I loved reading, like, again, about the 1980s, like reminding myself of places. I was on Google Maps walking streets, that I knew from childhood, but I was like there walking on Street View. And I think in a story, like, there are times you research a story, but it doesn't have that kind of expanse.
Tell me, do you have any advice or words of wisdom for new writers?
Well, I do think that that idea of just write, I sound like a Nike ad or something, like, just do it. But I do think that part of the process is getting over yourself sometimes and just writing. And I work with someone, I teach, and there's another man I teach with, and I heard him one day telling the students, "Give me your ugly writing." And I was like, I loved that line, because what he meant was, like, stop being precious about it and write, because then you have something to work with on the page. And I do think for a lot of writers, that's the obstacle, that writing got mystified somewhere along the line. It became this magic thing rather than just the thing that you should sit down and tackle and just do.
Una, thank you so much for joining me all the way from Ireland. I love the book. I hope everybody will go out and buy a copy. May you sell many, many books.